Hello there. I'm Alex, and I sell cheese for a living. As a cheesemonger and certified cheese professional, I have helped thousands of customers find their favorite cheese. Every week, I'll share what I've learned from behind the counter as we explore the vast and fascinating world of cheese. From the basics of how it's made to the stories, people, and cultures behind it. Welcome to episode 1 of The Modern Monger. These first few episodes are going to cover the fundamentals, what cheese is, how and where to buy it, and most importantly, how to eat it. Today's episode begins with the most basic, but also the most important question of all: what even is cheese? Now, if you are the kind of person who goes to a store and you pick up a block of nice yellow cheddar, and you look at it and you think, oh, good, cheddar, yes, I like this, I will take this home, I will eat that, and that will be the end of my thought on that, then this show might be a little more in-depth than what you're used to. If, though, you are the kind of person who walks into a store and picks up a little block of yellow cheese, and perhaps you start reading the label, and you don't exactly know what all the words mean. What is, annatto? What is rennet? What is an enzyme? And if you've had the question of, I thought milk was white, why is this cheese yellow? Then you probably are in the right place. This is the show for you. We are going to cover all of that. We're going to talk about the milk that is required to go into cheese making, how the cheesemaker turns milk into a hard and chewy, sometimes soft and gooey product, and we will go over how cheese is aged. All right, let's start from the simplest definition. Cheese is milk that has been transformed. At its core, it's milk that has been preserved so it can last longer and taste better than milk ever could on its own. It only takes a few ingredients: milk, a starter culture, a coagulant, salt, and time. That's the foundation of almost every cheese in the world. Some cheeses require more finesse or extra ingredients, maybe a specific mold. You might wash the rind or add spices and flavorings, but milk, culture, coagulant, salt, and time are at the heart of all of it. Humans have been making cheese for thousands of years, long before refrigeration, long before grocery stores, and definitely long before there were podcasts about it. The origin story of cheese that gets most often told goes something like this. Thousands of years ago, someone was carrying milk in a pouch made from an animal's stomach. The natural enzymes in that stomach lining, or rennet, caused the milk to curdle. When they opened the pouch, instead of liquid milk, they found soft, floating curds separated from the whey. They tasted it, and to their surprise, it didn't kill them. As was most often the food experiment in ancient times, when you try something new, it wasn't always a for sure thing that you wouldn't get sick or that you would even survive it. There were a lot of trial and errors with food, and thankfully, this accidental experiment really worked out for humanity. And that accident was the beginning of cheese making. Archaeologists have found evidence of cheese production as far back as 7,000 years ago in what is now Poland and Croatia. Clay strainers with traces of milk fat suggested that early people were separating curds and whey even then. Ancient Egyptians depicted cheese on tomb walls, often in small wrapped bundles. And over in Mesopotamia, tablets from around 1700 BC include references to curdled milk and cheese rations given to their workers. Even the Bible and Homer's Odyssey make mention of cheese. When Odysseus and his crew encounter the Cyclops, they find his cave filled with milk and cheeses stored in baskets. The giant was apparently a cheesemaker, one of the oldest fictional ones we know. Picture this: a shepherd in the hot hills of the Fertile Crescent carrying milk from his flock in a leather pouch. By the time he stops to drink it, the milk has separated into a soft, tangy curd and watery whey. He doesn't know it yet, but he stumbled upon a technique that will feed entire civilizations. Cheese in its essence is controlled spoilage. Humans learn to guide and preserve milk's natural tendency to change. Every culture that had milk figured out its own way to turn it into cheese. In the Mediterranean, it became feta and pecorino. In India, paneer. In Mexico, cotija. In France, brie and camembert. In Northern Europe, Gouda and cheddar. Each cheese was a solution to the same problem. How do we make milk last? And all good cheeses start with one thing: good milk. Milk is the canvas every cheesemaker starts with, and the type of milk you use dramatically changes what the final cheese becomes. Most of the cheese we eat today is made from cow's milk, simply because cows produce a lot of it. Goats, sheep, and water buffalo round out the other major cheese-making animals, but the cow is king. Cow's milk is mild, balanced, and available almost anywhere. It is high enough in fat and protein to create structure and flavor, but neutral enough to let cultures and aging do their work. That's why hundreds of cheese styles use it as their base. A good dairy cow can produce around 6 gallons of milk a day, which makes it efficient for cheese making. Goats, by comparison, produce 3 to 4 quarts a day, and sheep just 2 to 3.5 quarts. You would need several goats or a small herd of sheep to match only one cow's yield. Of course, the breed, diet, and season all affect the output of milk. Goat's milk is an entirely different story than cows. It has a distinctive aroma and flavor, often described as earthy, grassy, and barnyardy, though that depends on what the goat eats and how the milk is handled. People tend to love it or hate it. There's rarely a middle ground that I've seen. I personally love fresh goat cheese, or chev, especially when it's tangy, light, and a little bit citrusy. Goat's milk also contains smaller fat globules and a different casein protein structure than cow's milk. This makes it easier for some people to digest. It's not entirely lactose-free, that is a common myth, but because it's easier on the stomach, many people who can't tolerate cow's milk can still enjoy goat's milk cheese. Now, as far as lactose intolerance goes and other dairy-related allergies, that is something we are going to go much deeper in a further episode. And then there's sheep's milk, the richest of the trio. It has nearly twice the butterfat of cow's milk, along with higher protein and solids. That's why sheep's milk cheeses like Manchego, Pecorino Romano, and Roquefort are so lush and flavorful. The fat gives them body and sweetness. The protein adds structure, and because sheep produce less milk, these cheeses are usually more expensive. But every drop counts. Sheep's milk can yield up to twice as much cheese per gallon as cow's milk. And finally, the unsung hero, water buffalo milk. It's the milk behind true mozzarella di bufala from southern Italy. It is extraordinarily creamy, high in butterfat, and slightly tangy, giving that mozzarella its signature melt and milky sweetness. Across the world, other animals join the roster too. You have camels, you have yaks, and reindeer. Humans have made cheese out of almost every milk they could find. It's one of the universal human inventions, like bread or beer. Proof that people will always find a way to make something delicious from what they have. But you don't see too many camel, yak, or reindeer cheeses from behind the counters of most cheese shops. Okay, you have your milk. Now it's time to decide what to do with it. That's where the cheese making begins. The first big choice is whether or not to pasteurize. Pasteurization heats milk to kill unwanted bacteria, the kind that can make you sick, giving the cheesemaker a clean slate to work from. Some prefer that control, and then they can add their own selected cultures, and then they know exactly what they're working with. Milk comes out of the cow or dairy animal as a sterile product, but there is still an enormous chance of it picking up bacteria anywhere from the teat to the holding container. Now, if you take that milk and you pasteurize it, then a lot of that bad bacteria, bad is a very subjective word, but you take that bacteria that may be unwanted, and if you get rid of it, the milk is a little more bland, but it's a little more, it is like a blank slate. If you choose not to pasteurize your milk or keep it raw, that helps keep the natural bacteria. And some cheesemakers believe that the raw milk gives a more complex, almost farmier flavor. But it is a little riskier, depending on your age, your ability to be pregnant or not, and if you are squeamish. Some people hear the word raw and they do not enjoy the thought of that because they have it associated with other things like raw meat. In the United States, the law says that raw milk cheeses must be aged at least 60 days before it can be sold. That aging period allows any harmful bacteria to die off naturally while the flavor develops. In other countries, that law doesn't necessarily exist. You can make raw milk cheeses and eat it the next day or sell it at your shop. All right. So you've decided to pasteurize or not pasteurize your milk. Now you have it all in a large vat. What do? It depends if you want your cheese to come out a more natural white color or something a little more artificial, that bright yellow color, which is oh too familiar in the dairy aisles. That color is an attempt to recreate quality product. In the old days, the grass-fed cows that would make cheese, their milk could sometimes pick up a little bit of the beta-carotene from the grass, and then as they make cheese from that milk, it would have an orangish hue, or at least a deeper colored white, not bright white like most milk would be. These cheeses were often favored and held at a higher standard, and so people tended to think that that color of cheese was something to be sought after, that was a quality indicator, was the color. Now, annatto was first added to cheese as early as the 16th century in England, and it was used to mimic the color of high-fat cheeses to kind of standardize the color between seasons. Like I said, the fresh grass in the spring and summer versus whatever they were feeding them in the off seasons, if you added that coloring to the milk, it kind of blended so the product would be consistent year-round. Now, annatto is made from the achiote tree, which is native to South America and the Caribbean. It is the seeds of a plant, and the seeds are usually a deep red color. And they've been used for dyes throughout history, and even in a lot of Aztec paintings. Nowadays, the primary use of annatto is to color food, particularly cheese. Now, the annatto color, the reddish-orange color, can fade if put in direct contact with light or sun exposure. So a cheese that has been colored with annatto can eventually sort of revert back to its original color if it has been affected by light over a long period of time. Annatto can also affect the texture of some cheeses. Overall, there is nothing wrong with eating cheese that has been colored with any kind of coloring or flavor added to it. It's just some people do not enjoy the thought of a dye applicated to a food, even if the dye is completely natural. The difference between a white and a yellow cheddar is primarily just a little bit of coloring. And the coloring is added to the milk in the vat before any kind of coagulant is added. Now that the milk is ready, you warm it up and you add a starter culture. These are beneficial bacteria that feed on lactose, the sugar in the milk, and convert it into lactic acid. This lowers the pH, thickens the milk slightly, and sets the stage for coagulation, the separation of curds and whey. Some cheeses, there is no added bacteria, there is no added starter culture. Sometimes if you leave the milk out alone long enough, it itself will begin to curdle naturally. Now, the adding of bacteria will lower the pH, it will thicken the milk, and it will set the stage for coagulation. To make the milk curdle, you add a coagulant. The traditional one is rennet, which is an enzyme originally found in the lining of young animals' stomachs. This would be the same enzyme that was lining the stomach pouch of the ancient person who was carrying milk. The milk would have reacted to the rennet in the stomach lining, and that enzyme is what would have made the milk coagulate into curd. Now, if you're reading a cheese label, enzyme is usually another word for rennet. Not every time, but that can be the case. Today, you can get cheeses made with rennet or microbial sources, or even genetically engineered sources that mimic the natural enzyme. Acid, like vinegar or lemon juice, can also do the job, and is often used for simple fresh cheeses like paneer or queso fresco. When the rennet or acid does its work, the milk proteins, called casein, clump together. The solid part that forms is the curd. The liquid that drains off is the whey. At this moment, milk has officially crossed the line and become cheese. The curds are then cut to a desired size. The smaller the curds, the more the whey drains out, and the firmer the final cheese. Larger curds hold more moisture, creating softer cheeses. If you heat or cook the curds, they shrink even more, tightening that texture. That's how you get hard cheeses like Parmigiano Reggiano or Gruyere. Now, the whey isn't waste, though. Cheesemakers can use it for ricotta, to feed other animals, or even ferment it into drinks. Historically, nothing from milk went to waste. Once the curds are the right size and texture, they're gathered and pressed. Pressing expels more whey and gives the cheese its shape. Then, salt is added. Either mixed directly into the curds, rubbed on the outside, or added through a brine bath. Salt is a preservative, but it also balances flavor and controls microbial growth during aging. From there, cheese making becomes an art of time and environment. The curds rest, and then over days, weeks, months, or even years, enzymes and microbes transform that texture and flavor. Now, we have cheese. Do we eat it right now, or do we wait? That's a big question, and there's no real wrong answer. It just depends on what the cheesemaker is going for. Now, aging the cheese, or affinage, is where cheese really develops some strong characteristics. The person who oversees that process is called an affineur, someone who tends to the cheese like a gardener would tend to plants. During aging, moisture slowly leaves the cheese while flavor compounds develop. Proteins break down, fat oxidizes, and the rest is a symphony of aromas and textures. Fresh cheeses like mozzarella, ricotta, and chèvre are ready within a day or two. They taste of the milk itself, bright and clean. Soft ripened cheeses like brie or camembert are aged for a few weeks. That helps them develop the bloomy rind that gives them their mushroomy aroma and creamy interior. Washed rind cheeses, the fun ones like Taleggio or Apois, are rubbed with brine or alcohol during aging, encouraging bacteria that create that orange, sticky rind and the big, bold smells that come with it. Hard cheeses, like Parmesan or Gouda, can rest for years. Think of it this way. As the cheese ages, it dries out and condenses. It's like a story being edited down to its essence. The flavors concentrate into caramel, nutty, and some crystalline textures can form. These are tyrosine crystals, which is a collection of protein. In medieval Europe, monasteries became some of the greatest cheese-making centers. Monks perfected techniques for aging and preserving cheese, keeping cellars cool and humid. Many famous cheeses, Munster, Port Salut, or even some styles of blue, owe their entire existence to monastic experimentation. By the time of the Roman Empire, cheese had become an everyday staple. Romans classified cheeses by texture and age, traded them across the empire, and even wrote about them in cookbooks. The earliest known cheese recipe comes from De Re Rustica by Columella, written in the 1st century, describing how to curdle milk with rennet and how to press the curds. Picture this: ancient Rome, a bustling market, vendors shouting over one another, wheels of cheese stacked beside wine and oils. Even then, people were arguing about which region made the best cheese. And some things never change. Today's affineurs are the heirs of that same tradition. They monitor temperature, humidity, and airflow, turning and brushing each wheel to keep it aging evenly. Some cheeses are aged a few weeks, others several years. I've had cheddars in my case that have been aging for over 15 years. Now, 15 years. Imagine what you were doing 15 years ago. I would have been, I think, still in high school. It is a lifetime ago for most people. And this cheese has just been sitting in a cellar or in a cave, wherever it is, and someone or a group of people have been making it their day-to-day job to keep track of all this extremely old milk and turn out a delicious product. And 15 years isn't even that old in some cheese worlds. There is 20-year cheddars, and there's even been stories of people who find wheels of cheese in the back of their cooler long past what they would have assumed is edible, and wash it up, crack it open, and enjoy a very strong, pungent cheese. Now, another part of the aging is the patience and skill required to take care of the cheese through that time. Let's say something comes up on the cheese wheel and you need to get rid of it. Does that destroy the cheese, or are you able to do it in a way that is allowing it to maintain its aging process and it can keep going? And when you buy the cheese in the store, you aren't just buying the cheese. You are buying the time, the care, everything that went wrapped up into getting that cheese onto your plate. And sometimes it started 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Even a 9-month cheddar is still 9 months of someone taking care of a cheese day in and day out. So there is a lot of quality in an aged cheese. I've said cheddar a lot. There's a ton of extra options out there other than cheddar. That's just the one that's come to my mind. But it is incredible that there is such a product of the world that you can produce fresh from an animal, modify it a little bit, and then throw it on a shelf for a decade, and then still eat it and be perfectly fine. It is amazing. To wrap up, so what is cheese? At its core, like I said, it's transformation. It's milk and a few simple ingredients that become something greater than themselves. It's a food that connects shepherds from an ancient Mesopotamia to affineurs in a modern Paris, farmers in Wisconsin to the monks in the Alps. Cheese is an edible history, and that's what this podcast is all about. Learning about cheese, celebrating it, and finding ways to bring it into your life, however you like it, with whoever you like. On the next episode, we'll talk about buying cheese, how to tell if something is artisan, how to pick a cheese you've never tried, and how to have the confidence to know you picked well. Thank you for listening. My name is Alex, and this has been episode 1 of The Modern Monger.